Hello, and welcome to all of you beautiful souls tuning in today to the Heart of the Soul podcast. I'm your host, Amana, and I'm so happy you're here. This is a space where we remember what it means to be wild women walking upon this earth, navigating the ebbs and flows of the seasons we're in. This podcast is an opportunity for women to practice using our voices and the ancient ritual of storytelling. We share our stories and honor how they inevitably shift and change over time and depending on who we're sharing them with. I hope that as you soak in these heartfelt stories, you're able to feel less alone and more connected to all the beautiful souls of this world. Today is Monday, October 24th, and I'm currently in my mother-in-law's bedroom here in Eastern Washington. And she is caring for my two littles, so I can sit here and be with Fairlie Theta. I have Fairlie Theta here with me today. She has a podcast called Love and a Little Magic, which is magic in and of itself. We first met on the Free Birth Society membership, and I've enjoyed listening to the wisdom that she shares on her podcast about healing herself, which heals the world, or healing ourselves can heal the world, and asking questions like, are you thriving? Fairlie, I would love for you to take a moment to tell people where you are in the world and a bit about yourself and what brought you here today.
Thank you. I am Fairlie Theta. I am currently in central Pennsylvania. I just moved here in March, actually a month before my daughter was born, after so many years in New York City, New Jersey, that general area. And it's been remarkable. It's a remarkable place in the world here. And I'm feeling so energetically different than I was even just a year ago, which has been incredibly healing in and of itself. So, yeah, I am in my bedroom, which is new to me. I like I said, I lived in a very small apartment in New York before. So having all of this beautiful space is incredible. And it's such a gift to be able to set up and actually share and sit down with people virtually in a space like this that is my own, and not have to worry about, the entire world outside as well. So thank you so much for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, what brought you to Pennsylvania? Why Pennsylvania? Had
Well,
you visited before? Or?
I grew up not very, very far away. I grew up in New Jersey, which is only about 3.5, 4 hours from where I am now. Um, but a lot of my friends growing up, because I was homeschooled and I didn't have like a very central friend group hub like a lot of kids do growing up. A lot of my friends were virtual and they were mostly located in Pennsylvania. So I did spend a lot of time growing up in Pennsylvania, but it was the like Bucks County, Philadelphia area, not quite this far out. So it's a little funny to me that I ended up here afterwards. It's this weird full circle moment of my life where it's like, oh, I do live in Pennsylvania now after all of that. Um, but we actually ended up where we ended up because, like I said, I lived in New York, and I really I always thought I was going to live in New York City. When I was a kid growing up, I really fell in love with that city vibe and being able to just walk out the door and do anything at any hour of the day. I shouldn't say anything because it's a very different kind of anything that I can do here. But you know what I mean, where it's like, you know what? I want to go get a bag of pretzels at 4 o'clock in the morning. And it's like, sure, you pop down to the corner bodega and there it is. And to me, that was magical at 16. And to be able to feel like a part of history. I was a goth kid, and it was like all the punk rock magic of New York City. So I lived there for quite some time, and then it became very apparent to me while I was in college and beyond that punk rock is pretty dead, actually. um so uh, it it was only a matter of time before that got a little stale. And I needed more space to breathe. And after 2020 and 2021 and all the rest of that went down, the world kind of went sideways. Um, I found that I was pregnant. And we had talked about getting out of New York for quite some time, but we had no idea where to go. So it was really sort of a weekend getaway. We had planned to visit some friends who had moved out to this area. They had lived in Jersey City for many years after they left New York City. My daughter, sorry. And we just came out here to visit, and it was amazing. The community that they had become a part of in such a short amount of time was so welcoming. And we were there the first night, and there was a whole group of friends who were eager to meet us and invite us to dinners, and really make space for us there. And just the driving through this beautiful rolling landscape, it was magical, and we couldn't really leave. It was definitely tense to get back in the car and go back to New York after our weekend was over. So the very last day we were here, we were sitting in my friend's kitchen, and she has this beautiful, like, restored farmhouse on this gorgeous cliff. And we just sat there with my computer open, and we started looking at listings. And about a week later, we found this property, and things were in motion. So it kind of all came together like that.
Wow, how
The market was
synchronous.
crazy. I know, right? We were so afraid we were going to be looking for a year and a half, and I was going to be toting a toddler around to house showings because that's how crazy the market was where we are. And instead, it just all came together. So I'm here, and my daughter was born on this property, which is exactly what I wanted, for us as a family. And it's been a learning journey and a healing journey, and a gift to wake up here every day. It really is.
Yes. Wow. Yes, you've had a lot of transition in a short period of time. Yeah, how is transition for you? How do you I feel like the flow of the seasons when we live in a space with four seasons, that's such like a natural time to like experience those transitions each year. And I wonder how you connect with the seasons, and are you comfortable in the transition, or does it yeah, how do transitions feel for you?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the things that I think is the most striking about, where we are now. Um, we bought this house just about exactly a year ago, actually, the end of October last year, but we didn't move in until uh, I moved in March. My husband joined me in April. No, I'm sorry. I moved in February. My husband joined me in March. So we've not really experienced the full spectrum of seasons, but we have, we've seen at least bits of winter here before we were here full time. And it's very how do I put it? It's you end up sinking to the energy of the seasons. I end up sinking to the energy of the seasons very easily.
Yeah,
Where, in New
beautiful.
York, when I was there, we were living in this very like tiny industrial apartment over a garage, like a commercial garage. And it was kind of a slog where it's like, oh, you mean now it's going to start snowing and I'm going to have to cross the street with like puddles of slush and like, oh, the leaves. What if I step on a bug? And it's like, we're here, like I said, I moved here in February, which was kind of the tail end of winter. So we did end up missing a bulk of the winter. And then about a week before my daughter was born in April, we had this massive snowstorm, and all the trees had already bloomed. So it was very strange. It was, everything was green, the grass had come back, and we have this beautiful weeping cherry outside our bedroom door. And I woke up that morning and it was just covered in snow, and it looked like someone had decorated for Christmas. But overnight outside in spring. And I think that was the moment that I realized that this is not a place that you live as a like master of land. You know, you don't buy this house and just command it, you know. You live in harmony with this land. You have to. Um Otherwise, you sorry, we're gonna fuss a little bit here.
No, it's so wonderful. It's perfect.
Bringing her up
She's
here for the
beautiful.
conversation. Thank you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. Hi,
Oh.
she sees the camera now. Yeah, you know, being on this property in this place, you realize that you're just a part of an ecosystem. And, you know, when it snows, it's not about how you're going to get to your car and how fast you're going to get to work. It's, you know, understanding the processes that are going to change around that event. So like, you know, the fact that it snowed in April, none of the fruit trees really grew fruit this year. You know, the vegetables came up later. It was definitely a very, you know, kind of wonky growing season. Nice with the kitty. Good girl. And that in and of itself, you know, maybe echoed a little bit. It's hard to tell sometimes whether the internal reflects the external or vice versa, because you
Yes.
know, my daughter was born at the end of April, and I had envisioned for myself this really, you know, intensive gardening season, and I was going to plant all of these things and harvest all of my own food. And then, you know, being postpartum, especially those first few weeks, in the thick of the growing season, I couldn't really get out of bed and, you know, intensely farm. It wasn't happening. So
No,
it's
no, you needed to rest. Yes, and
exactly.
heal. Mhm.
So it's a little funny where it's like, oh, you know, but the growing season was a little strange this year, and my growing season was a little strange this year too, for its own reasons. So like I've definitely felt myself sink here in a way that I haven't with other places. And it's
Yeah, I
part
liked how
of this.
it sounded
Yeah.
like I was just gonna say it sounded like when you were describing sort of sometimes the experience of the seasons in New York that there was some like resistance to it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
here it feels like more like embracing the season and the shift. And I think that is so like aligned and beautiful. And at the same time, you also made this huge transition fully from like maiden into mother, which is like one of those transformative. Like I hate all the hate whatever. I hate all the language that people are like, get back to how you were before you were a mom. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, that doesn't exist anymore. Like that's a whole, you know, we never go back to being the person we were before we were a mother. We're completely transformed. And for you, you were also in a whole new place and new community. And I wonder if you could speak to that experience at all for yourself. And was there the community that you were anticipating would be there as you gave birth? And did you have the support postpartum that you were hoping for, or how was that for you?
Well, um, it's interesting, because I do think that this you're right, you know, there is no going back, as far as like, you know, when you cross that motherhood threshold, you become a different person, and you there are parts of yourself that you'll never access again. And it's funny because taking such a giant leap moving felt like the same thing, honestly, exactly too, where it was like, you know, now we're here and there are things that we can't access anymore. And there are parts of ourselves that we can't go back to because this is what we chose. So it was kind of this crashing realization all at once of these things. So I do I do think that they all kind of co-contributed to each other. When I gave birth, I actually um I had actually worked with a midwife and she was local to my now home. Um, she was I think she was actually the only midwife in the area I could get in contact with who was accepting anybody for home births in this area. Um, my daughter thinks that this is a fun toy. And so at about 38 weeks, when she had prepared for our home visit, she came here and checked everything out, and we had a whole plan in place. We actually had to go back to New York to get some paperwork signed for my husband's job, and his insurance. And we had to have it signed by a New York practitioner. They would not accept our midwife's signature. So I panicked. I managed to find a New York home birth midwife who was willing to sign the paperwork in exchange for one prenatal exam. And I was like, sure, let's do it. How bad can it be? Except that the way that it was all timed out, we had to basically like wake up here and then race back to New York, which is like a 5-hour drive, and sneak in like
And
just before her closing
really
hours.
pregnant.
Yeah, exactly. I was, 38 weeks pregnant, and it was intense, and like we were running late. And so, I was drinking so much water during my pregnancy. You have to, but also like I was just incredibly thirsty all the time. And I didn't drink water that day because I didn't want to be stopping every 5 minutes to use rest stops and the rest of it. And so we got to this midwife. And first of all, she measured my fundal height in a way that was very different from what I was used to. So measuring, instead of measuring me laying down as I was used to being measured, she measured me sitting up. And she was instantly like, oh, has your midwife, has your midwife expressed any concern for the fact that you're measuring so small? And I'm like, excuse me, and she was like, well, if she hasn't brought it up before, it's probably fine. Maybe like it's could be your frame. I'm very tall. So she was like, maybe it's just your height. And I was like, okay, but I was still very concerned. And she's like, I think you have low amniotic fluid, but not my place to say. I'm not your main midwife. So
I'm just planting this seed of like concern and fear.
exactly. So I of course leave. And at this point it's like 7 o'clock at night and I'm exhausted and we've driven for so long and I'm a little bit panicked, and I text our midwife and I ask her, is there any reason why I would be measuring so vastly different between 2 days? She just measured me the day before and had said that, in fact, she thought that my baby was probably totally average size, like 7 pounds. And, everything was great. And she texts me back like 2 hours later and is like, oh, how did she phrase it? Oh, something like, oh, strange. I trust my judgment though, and I haven't really thought there's any concern here. Probably just, 2 different people measuring. And I was like, okay, I'm satisfied with that answer. And certainly, I did the Googling thing and, found forum post of people saying the same thing and that they had delivered perfectly healthy, normal babies. And I was like, fine, I'm over it. So we're about to drive back home from New York. Everything is in order. And it's about 5 o'clock at night and I get a call from our midwife. And she says, like, she was like, I hope that, you're doing okay today. Have you had any, further thoughts about yesterday? And I was like, I'm totally better. I feel so much, better at this point. Good to go. And she's like, well, I've been thinking about it and maybe you shouldn't be so confident. And I was like, what? Like, what? Like, and the color, I think, totally drained out of my face. And I just look at my husband and he's like, put it on speaker because like, what's going on right now? And she's like, So I'm going to call the hospital and talk to the midwife team there, but I really think that you should be doing an ultrasound and like a body scan because I know it just doesn't sit right with me. And I went back over my papers and I realized, yeah, you have been measuring a little bit small. So it's just better if we get this checked out and and I'm just like, "Ooh, this came out of nowhere, came out of literally nowhere." And the whole reason that we had gone with this midwife was because she caters to a lot of the local Amish community. And, I know they're not on board with medical intervention. So I was, really thinking that this was going to be the safest bet, the best way to guarantee what I needed out of this birth experience. And here she is telling me that I need a body scan at 38 weeks. And, by the way, you might want to bring a bag because if they find something, really wrong, you might be, you're in the age range to, or you're in the gestational age range to be induced.
What?
Yeah. So, so I'm like, you know what? Give me a few minutes and I'll call you back and like, we'll let you know what we're going to do because we're in New York anyway. So we actually, pull over on the side of the road and I'm sobbing and my husband is getting angry. And we're both like, you know what? It's 5 o'clock at night. We're not going to get there before 10. Does this really have to happen today? We were going to see her like 2 days later. I think it was a Friday. We were going to see her on that Monday. And she was like, I just missed, the midwife team anyway, because they leave at 5, I guess. She's like, so if you're, why don't you just come to my office on Monday and we'll talk about it? Okay. So um we had her birth pool here in our house ready to go. So we came back, we packed it up, we put it in the car, and we were totally ready to tell her to take a hike on Monday because whether or not there was anything wrong with our baby, we could not have someone with that level of doubt in our space during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And we end up going there on Monday. And, we figured it would probably look a little fishy to just kind of drop it on the doorstep and run. So we were like, okay, we're going to go through the appointment as if nothing is wrong. And then like basically call her Tuesday or whatever and just say, you know what, we thought about it. We're going with a different direction. So normally we would get in and like talk, before we would do any measuring or anything. And instead, this time we go straight to the back and she starts to take heart tones. And, the one thing that had always kind of bothered us about this supposedly low intervention midwife was that she had us wear masks in her office. So I'm wearing a mask and she's taking heart tones and I'm super nervous because we're literally breaking up with someone. And
Mm-hmm.
she looks at me and the look on her face was like extreme concern. And she's like, the baby's heart is way too fast. And she's like, I'm getting like 190 or something like that. And, this is technically a tachycardic episode. And then I start really panicking. And my husband is like, you know what? Go back into the other room, take off your mask, like calm down. You got to just breathe through this. And because he's like, she's having a panic attack. Like you can't actually take accurate measurements if she's having a panic attack. And he's getting
Totally.
kind of upset with her. um, and sure enough, in like 5 minutes, I was breathing. I took my mask off. I was breathing fine. Her heart rate went back down to its normal range. And, everyone was good. But of course, at that point, the midwife is like, I'm really concerned by that. And I think that you need to leave here and go to the hospital and do a non-stress test. And she's like, if this is how your baby is reacting to a routine prenatal exam, I don't think she's going to survive labor. Literally what she told me.
On
And
the nerve. Whoa.
yeah. And I was like, well, what do you think they're going to do at the hospital? And she's like, well, they're going to do this test, and if they don't like the results, then they'll induce you. And I was like, wait a minute, you just said she's not going to survive labor, and then those are natural contractions. You think she's going to survive induced contractions? Those are stronger. And she was like, oh yeah, no, you're right. But in that case, it'll probably just be a C-section. You could have your baby by the end of this week. And I'm just like, none of this is what I wanted. So at that point, I'm panicking, I'm sobbing, and my husband is like, you know what, give us the day to think. And, we'll talk later or tomorrow morning and figure out what to do. And she was like, okay, that sounds good to me, which, in my mind, even in my freaking out, was like, so this isn't an emergency, because if it was, there would be no option to talk later. So we were like, that's it. We have to get rid of her. There is no option here. And we went back the next morning, and sure enough, she meets us outside with this little clipboard. And I'm like, oh my God, she's breaking up with us. Like, this is how this is going. So it was, I cut her off at the pass and was just like, we have to go in separate directions. We're going to take a different route at this point. And she's like, oh, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I don't think we could continue with care. I think that the trust has been broken on all sides. And I'm like, what did you have to trust me on? Like, I'm the one giving birth here.
How
So
bizarre.
I know, right? So at that point, it was kind of a like, well, what do we do? And as you said, in the beginning, I was already a member of the Free Birth Society membership. I had talked with Emily a few times, just as far as like unpacking some of the issues that I had brought to my pregnancy to begin with. And I was like, I think we're going to have to free birth it. Like, I think this is just the way this is going to be. And I kind of always saw it that way from the beginning. So again, how much is the external reflecting the internal? But, we had moved here because of the community. So this was a community connection. Not that she was an intimate friend of anybody we knew, but she was a, respected person about town in a good friend who owned business in the same town. So we were just like, we don't want to like burn a bridge here or anything like that. But there were no other community resources available to us at that point. It was like, well, we got what we got, and now we're on our own. So in that way, there was a slight disappointment, I guess, in like where we were. And, even when we mentioned to a couple friends what had happened, they were like, well, you can't do it by yourself. Like, that's dangerous and that's bad. And like, this is your first baby. Are you sure you want to do that? So we got offers of like, I know this RN and I know this person who could come and sit with you guys. And, at one point, actually my favorite offer, and we were close on taking it, was to have a little Amish woman come and sit with us, just in case while I gave birth. Which we realized, later quickly that it would never work in our home, just because we have a lot of strange art and things that the Amish would probably not remotely appreciate. So yeah, when it actually came time to, postpartum, like kind of call on some people for support, we were a little disappointed that nobody kind of really came through for us in any way. Even like all the meals that were prepared were on my husband. He took care of everything postpartum, which I am so grateful for. We were having construction done on the house, and even that, like, the contractors were like, well, we're just going to not come, because we want you to have your space and whatever, which was a lovely effort. But honestly, for us, it would have been better to like get through it than it would have been to just kind of keep living in like there was garbage in my house, like it was not just like noise, it was like actual construction mess. Please come and take the garbage kind of thing. And looking back, and I've always been the kind of person that can kind of take myself out of the situation to try to figure out what's going on with other people in it. I think they thought they were being considerate. like we give them time and we give them space to adjust to being a family, and we'll regroup on the other side of that. Um, and honestly too, like your sense of time when you're postpartum is totally different from anybody else's sense of time. So time gets away from people, and they might like I still have friends now who are just like, oh my God, I meant to get in touch with you. And I'm like, it's been 6 months, like it's
Yeah.
not a, you know, so time moves differently for people. So, now on this side of everything where, my daughter is 6 months old and we're kind of getting back out into the world,
Mm.
things are coming together, for us. We've met
Mhm.
even more people, and we've, kind of fallen in with a bunch of great new friends, that have been amazing. And I'm so glad that we're here. But there was definitely time when I was in the thick of postpartum where I was mourning, like, oh my God, what did we do? We left everything we knew. We left all the connections we've ever made, and we're here alone with a baby, So it was a trial by fire. It was.
Yeah. And may I ask you said you got lots of offers for people to like come and be with you in labor, but can I ask what you chose in the end for your birth?
Um, we decided that, considering how everything had played out with the midwife, we really did not want to invite any other stranger into our space.
Mhm.
Regardless of how experienced or how, beloved they were to others, we didn't know them, and we wanted to just handle it on our own. So we crash coursed everything we could. I had been, I'm a researcher by nature. I love to read and learn and find the ins and outs of literally everything. So as soon as I got pregnant, I was just like, we're gonna learn everything I can in the 9-month period. Obviously, birth is such a huge, huge field and event and experience that you can't really like study for it in that time. But
Mhm.
I did. It was
Yeah.
definitely, I read every book I could. I learned every technique I could. Um, so I was not feeling unprepared or scared about giving birth on my own. My
Yeah.
husband needed a little more encouragement. So when we let go of our midwife, I caught him up on everything I could. We sat down with a number of people, who are midwives or doulas, or, from the free birth membership, or, Emily, and tried to cram for every scenario we could as far as like
But
what could
but
happen.
in the end, you chose to birth with just you and your husband present. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, and the cat and the dog, because you can't get
Well,
rid of them.
yes.
Um, but yeah, it
And
was just us.
wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so then how was that experience for your constellation as a family and that transition? I know like for myself, it was, a huge transition to have this like living baby and to be then so much of my attention was on our baby, and like my husband went through some like periods of feeling sad and like neglected because all of my energy was here, and my little one wasn't sleeping very much. Like he liked to sleep attached to the boob. So I was like, I was co-sleeping with him and just not getting much sleep myself. And yeah, I love to hear what else you might want to share about that shift for you.
Yeah. It was a shift, that's for sure. You know, I think maybe because of the way we went into the birth process, we had kind of anticipated isolating, um, afterwards, and taking some time to adjust. And I had envisioned, we had this new life, and we were gonna, spend days in bed cuddling and learning each other, and, really just kind of getting to recalibrate as a family. But, like I said, we were kind of in the middle of this big other transition as well. So we had construction happening on the house, even though it was, paused for the week that I was, in labor, and even afterwards. and my husband was kind of in full like home improvement mode or like home making mode. So
Mhm.
like the day after I gave birth, he was refinishing the kitchen. He put up a new backsplash and like had all these little projects to take care of. And I like I've never been I'm an extrovert. I, might be only like 1% on the extrovert scale, but I do lean extroverted. So for me to process change, especially, I really do need other people around to kind of bounce thoughts off of.
Mhm.
Yeah, like a give and take, maybe even I'm feeling something that I don't even recognize until other people kind of help me through it. So
Mhm.
with him not there, it was a little difficult for me to, even though I was able to rest and focus solely on the baby and really kind of, you know, feel my body and figure out what it was that I was working on healing even internally. Um um it was difficult for me to do that on my own. And I do think that, perhaps jumping into a new house at the same time was not the right idea for us. Um,
Yeah. Do you feel like you knew what you needed in those times, or is it like only upon like, because I feel like for myself, sometimes it's like I can reflect and be like, oh, I needed to like ask for this or, do that. And
yeah.
yet when I was in the moment, my mind was like mush and I
Well, and
couldn't.
you're totally freshly postpartum brain where you're mush anyway. So yeah, it was probably a good 2 months or so before I realized what it was that I needed. Um, I'm not going to like sugarcoat anything and pretend. I definitely had some depression issues afterwards. And I recognize now that it was because of the isolation. Um,
Mhm.
it was not, trauma or lack of processing or anything like that, or, healing. It was literally that I had isolated myself in a way that was not conducive to me as a person. Um,
Mhm.
who are you talking to? um, um, looking back, I should have made a point to ask even other people to come by and, say hi and, whatever, sit with me for however long. Um, but it took me a bit to get there. I'd say that really it took us about 3 months to adjust really to being a family and needing to like being able, I should say, to balance our own needs with the needs of a baby. Because just like you're saying, she would not sleep unless she was attached to a boob. And she even like had some feeding issues for the first few weeks. We had to really work hard on her latch. And it was like one thing after another. It was like this kind of like it felt like Groundhog's Day, you
Mhm.
wake up, you do the feed pump, diaper cycle, and you do it again and again and again. And then by the time the baby is out at like 8, you're just like, oh my God, how am I gonna how am I gonna do this another day? Um and I have some regret, I guess, about the way that I felt during those times. Because I recognize how easy it would have been to resolve. I just needed to
Mhm.
ask somebody to be there. And I wasn't able to.
Yeah, I
So
mean, it's so hard and so common because like we're in living in this culture where it's just so normal to like
yeah,
we have like shifted into like out of this like societal communal living and into such like nuclear little boxes, and we don't talk that much about postpartum and the support that is
yeah,
like so like needed and ideally is provided without the woman having to ask for it herself, because that's
exactly.
takes energy and effort too, even to reach out and ask someone for support when you're already like struggling. We need people, the women in our community, to know that we need support in that time and show up and bring things and hold space. And that's
Yeah.
like the future that I dream about and want to like help co-create as we move forward in this life and in this experience as women building our own building communities.
It's true, and even on the side of things, talking to, women who have done this before me, my mother and, other mothers of especially her generation, I would be told things like, well, that's just not how we did it. You came home from the hospital and like, maybe your mom came to stay for a little bit. And it's like, but that's still so far from what it really needs to be to really have, like, this really is a rite of passage. And we don't have any way of marking that. And in fact, like you said before, it's like the language around it is, oh, get back to XYZ. And it's like, no, there's no get back to. This is a change. And we don't treat it that way. And other people don't even understand what it is that you do need, let alone being able to supply it without explicit instructions. And then you're pushy, So wow, you've got a lot to say about this little girl.
Yes. Have you heard of like the term matrescence?
Yes, it's one of my favorite words.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's something that like over these last couple of years, I've really been like, ooh, like it's been coming up in more things that I'm listening to and looking at, and just like, I feel like, but a lot of people have never even heard of it. And I'm like, I love that it encompasses like adolescence, like that transition from like child into, you're not quite an adult, but you're like in that sphere, and that everything is changing. Hormones are changing, your body is changing. And matrescence is similar, but different in that we're becoming mothers, and that our hormones are shifting, our bodies are shifting and changing. And like you said, we don't go back, our bodies don't go back to how they were. They'll never be exactly the same. We, each day of our life, we're growing one day older. And if we had like a fully like cultural societal awareness of matrescence, and if I feel like you said, like rites of passage and ceremony and rituals, like those things can be so potent and so helpful in these times, and yet they're not commonplace or common practice.
No, and I think I definitely didn't realize until I became a mother. Oh no, my boogie girl. That, we have a life cycle. Human beings are part of, the larger animal culture. We have a life cycle and it plays out every single day. So, it's not like it's, I think that we're kind of duped into thinking that we are like part of this eternal youth culture.
Mhm.
Yay! Daddy came to the rescue there. Thank you. We think that we're part of this eternal youth culture. And, it's like all about the productivity and the hustle and the constant ups energy. And, we are expected to get back to being a child, not even a child, being a constant teenager. And it's unrealistic. And quite honestly, it's so damaging, because I do think it robs us of so much meaning. Having a baby and watching her grow and develop. And, I really am, my husband works from home, and I, work with things here too, but like, I really am 99% a mom, and I do what I can afterwards. So I spend all of my time watching her and trying to help her, not even help, just encourage her. It's amazing. It's a psychedelic trip every single second. And you really do center yourself in this awareness of, I was that at one point, and, I will be her grandmother. And, there's a cycle. We don't think about that. And certainly, when everything projected at us is, consume, do the hobbies, side hustle, whatever it is, you don't get to understand how incredible it is that we're human beings, we're human animals, and we are bringing the next generation of human animals into this world. And if I teach her one thing, I hope it is that time is not infinite. We are finite creatures, and you need to squeeze meaning out of every single moment because it's there. It's not like there are just meaningless moments. Every single moment means something, even when it's not Instagrammable, even when it's not pretty enough, to take a snapshot of, there's meaning. And that has been my number one, like, motherhood lesson, which, again, ties right back into my number one rural living lesson. It's all one and the same. So, we're making it work at this point. At 6 months, we're making it work. It took a little bit to get there, but here we are.
Yeah, but I love how you're speaking to like the real of like the presence of being in the moment and just being with your daughter and not forcing any of these like different expectations or like so much of like like the apps of like tracking what your child is doing at this age, and are they sitting up, and are they waving, and are they doing all these different, like, why are we so focused on like ticking off these little boxes rather than just like being with them and experiencing who they are and who they're blossoming into, without like trying to force them to do certain tasks so that we can tell other people or tell them, I don't know. It's such an
I think it's
interesting
yeah,
time
I
for it.
think it's like a replacement. If you are expected to go back to work and, reintegrate into the machine, then you need those hallmarks to be like, oh, 6 months, she should be sitting up by herself or whatever it is, because you don't see the day-to-day growth, and that's really sad. Like, that's really, my heart breaks thinking about all the mothers and babies who have to separate far too soon because
Yes.
they can't exist outside of the system that we've all been really thrown into.
Yeah, no other mammals leave their babies at that sort of vulnerable stage when they're needing nutrition from the mother, when they need like the nervous system connection. And yet most babies and mothers are torn apart
Yeah,
when
yeah.
so tiny.
It's really, I can't imagine leaving my daughter for more than, 15 minutes at a time, honestly. Like, even like we've gone out maybe twice since she's been born, and it was just, my mother or my sister who watched her, and my sister honestly looks exactly like me, and I think even she was a little confused about it. So like, I it it really does break my heart to think about that hustle culture being so predominant and really stealing meaningful moments from human beings. And that's not even to speak about like the developmental, like, are we just all becoming anxious disaster people because we live in this world where it's normal to be separated, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But um that's a whole that's a whole rabbit hole conversation in itself.
Yes, but it's like it's so true. I love how you bring also the aspect of, we don't have infinite time. Like no one knows when your time will be to die. Like people
Yeah.
don't even like saying die or death. Like,
Mm-mm.
but I really try to use those terms because all of us do die from, the moment we come into existence. Like we come to go. Like no human gets to stay. No flower that blossoms stays blossomed for infinity. It dies and goes back to the earth, and another flower is then born. And we don't acknowledge that, yeah, tomorrow is guaranteed to no one. And so, like, embracing the moments and times we have now,
No,
like,
yeah, it's true. And I think that, I'm obviously, I am not dying imminently that I know of. But to say, I really think that when you get to that point and you look back, I really don't think you're going to look back and say like, oh man, I really wish that I had made more money so I could have gotten that Gucci wallet, or like, whatever it is that like I hear people strive for these days. Like, oh, I just wish another building could have been named after me. It's like, you're probably going to look back and go like, I wish I had more time with my children. I wish I had more time with my spouse. I wish I had, more meaningful traditions that I could have passed on. Like, that's really what I've been smacked in the face with, like, for lack of a better, comparison here. Being a mother, like, I did finally at one point reach out to my parents and just say like, look, I feel like I'm drowning and I need some help. And, even if you're coming out to sit with us for, they live about 4 hours away. So like, even if you're just coming out for a couple hours for lunch or something, I'd love to see you. And like, and I mentioned to my dad how I kind of regret not doing more earlier on in my life, like kind of setting myself up maybe a more solid career base, or like whatever it was, to kind of have more to fall back on now. Like if we only had that extra 10,000 in the bank kind of thing, And my dad was the one who was like, what you're doing now is more important than any job you could have. What you are doing with your daughter, his granddaughter, is going to have more impact on the world than any body of work that I could have produced, or, any meaningless rack up the money career, I could have had. And that's not to say that people don't create amazing things that impact generations upon generations, but you know what I mean? Like it's about people. Without people, you don't have society, and you don't have history, and you don't have the rest of it. So being a mom is an incredibly tasking, the career in itself. And that's also been kind of an adjustment to realize that right now my currency is moments and meaning, rather than like happy clients and, money in the bank. But I don't think it's gonna make me a dissatisfied person in the end. I really think that this ultimately is going to mean so much more looking back, not just for me, but for my daughter and any future children that I have,
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
you are
I
crying out there, sir.
oh, do you want to go check or?
I think he got it under control. Sorry. It's the radar of just like, oh no, my baby's crying.
Oh, of
So
course, of course. What was I gonna say about like,
I'm sorry.
no, 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 no. Just I've had like a reckoning with myself about the value of the unpaid work that we do as mothers. Like our society doesn't value it, but yet assigning to it myself, and that like the unpaid work and nurturing of being a mother and mothering my kids, especially at this age when like right now they're like 2.5 and almost 6, like these years like never return. Like I've cared for so many other people's babies and kids in also these precious times, but then sometimes as they're reflecting back, they're like, oh, I wish I would have spent more time with my kids when they were little, because now they're like about to leave the nest and you can't get that time back.
Mm-mm.
And just because society doesn't value the work that I'm doing doesn't mean that I can't value it and see it as important. And yeah.
Yeah. I think that maybe the takeaway there is that we really should be thinking about what society values. Just because society values it does not mean that it in itself is valuable. And
Yes.
perhaps we all need to kind of look at where our values align or disalign with society and figure out whether that's maybe what's causing some of the strife, that we experience when it comes to these life transitions. Um, I was definitely thrown out of whack, coming into motherhood, realizing I couldn't just strap a baby to my chest and take all my appointments the way I normally would. And I had to be okay with the fact that, this was my job now. And ultimately, I know it's the right decision. The fact that society doesn't, I feel like that's society's problem. Like, it's
Yes.
there's a lot of illness out there that I think it's time to kind of face head on. But that is another part of, I think, the
Absolutely.
motherhood journey is looking at this going, what am I teaching my daughter? And, am I okay with the impression this is going to leave on her? So in that way, it's been a little easier to kind of weed through some of these influences and values and kind of make the choice on our own.
Yeah. Well, as we near close here, is there any, like, what else would you like to share, or for women that maybe are preparing to birth, or like what would you want them to know about motherhood that you have been learning through your experience?
Um, I I would say, don't actually I was about to say don't make any plans, but that sounds so much worse than I mean for it to. I mean, don't get hung up on your expectations. You know, you you as a mother, you don't even know who you're going to be yet. And certainly, even if you are so in tune with your baby, you know, in the womb, you don't know who that baby is going to be and what their journey is going to necessarily include. So stay open, give yourself grace and don't get so hung up on the expectation of the vision board that you've created for motherhood. Um, it's going to be beautiful if you allow it to be. There's going to be a lot of downtime. There's going to be a lot of time to think and process. So don't worry about planning up front. Stay open.
Yeah, no, that's so good. It makes me think about like all the expectations of mothers in wherever we're born. Like it's different depending on where you are in the world and who your community is, what they expect a woman to do as she becomes a mother, and how she's expected to behave in society towards her child, like in her marriage, and that we do have a choice whether or not we want to take on those expectations and fulfill what other people want of us, or have the ability and choice to create our own expectations of ourselves. And then also, like you're saying, but don't like, you can't like even know what you're going to be or how that's going to unfold until you're in it, and maybe even like years later reflecting back and witnessing what became of that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Witnessing. That's a good word for it. Just stay open and witness your experience. Don't worry about steering it as it's happening.
I like that. Yes. Beautiful. Would you please tell everyone where they can find you, your podcast, website, anything else?
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram at Fairlie Theta, just my name. I host Love and a Little Magic, which is my podcast, just kind of solo. And I'm launching a new podcast that's going to be more conversational, open up, to just different women's experiences of motherhood and even maidenhood and life in general, the feminine experience. Quiet Parts, that's launching very soon. And you can find that on Instagram as well at Quiet Parts. And my website, I am a card reader and astrologer by trade. So I have a few appointments open at this point around my daughter's nap schedule. But that's thatastrologer.com. So that's where you can find me best.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for having this conversation with me today and sharing your wisdom and stories.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been so much fun.
Mm. And thank you to all of you who are tuning in today. If you love the podcast, I would be so grateful if you choose to subscribe, or rate, review, or share the show. If you feel aligned with me and feel called to dive deeper through my sistership support and offerings, you can check out my website or book your free clarity call at birthingnova.love. And I would love to connect with you. Until next time, be brave, be bold, be love, be you.